Imagine a place of comfort. Perhaps it is a bench in your favorite little park. Maybe it's in the aisles of a bookstore or a library. Or maybe it's just as simply home. We all have our favorite places of comfort, but when you leave this mortal world, could you imagine spending the rest of eternity in these places you hold dearly? This week's video explores the Captain Bailey House in Nebraska. So grab your favorite fireside snack and come sit by the fiber while I tell you about the ghosts of Nebraska. Welcome back, y'all. My name is Olivia, and this is the 50 States Haunted House series. Can I just say that it is nice to be on this side of the hectic holidays? As much as I love the holidays, they can also be a little exhausting, so I'm just happy to try to get back to a new normal. Also, happy 2024. I hope you all had a restful holiday season and you're ready for a new year of fun and spooky content. And before we move on, I just wanted to invite y'all to let me know if there are any topics you want to see me cover this year. I'm going to be starting monthly long-form videos and will likely try to sneak in some other fun videos when I can too. So let me know what you would be interested in seeing from me. Anyway, enough of the housekeeping. Let's get into today's topic. For this week's haunted location, I was given Nebraska by the random state generator. Now, no hate to Nebraska, but this is one of those states I was a little nervous about because I'm a little convinced that there aren't more than about 15 people in the whole state, so I wasn't sure what I was going to find. And, by the way, it isn't just Nebraska. I'm also convinced that there can't be more than like 15 people in several nearby states either. I'm looking at you, Kansas and Oklahoma. But I will say there are actually quite a few really interesting haunted locations in Nebraska. Throughout the research, I did notice that one of the biggest pitfalls is that this is a haunted house series, and so many of the really cool haunted locations were outdoors. As much as I would love to cover one of the parks or cemeteries, that's not exactly the artistic goal I have for this particular series. So, today, I've chosen to put my focus on the Captain Bailey House because I love the architecture of the building, so that's what you're going to see me However, I felt like this story is a bit shorter than usual, so I thought it might be fun to include a few other interesting stories from other locations in Nebraska too. So let's dive in. Who was Captain Bailey? While I couldn't find a page specifically about him, a few of the sources mentioned that he was a Union officer who served with the 3rd Tennessee Mounted Infantry. Now, the rest of the information I have on him came from what looks like someone's fun, haunted road trip blog, so maybe take this with a grain of salt. Allegedly, Bailey's first marriage ended in tragedy when his wife and infant daughter passed, leaving Bailey as the single father of 3 children. He would later remarry a woman who was also from Tennessee, and they would move to Nebraska with the kids in order to have a fresh start. Upon arrival, Bailey had the home built near the Missouri River in order to help facilitate his new career as a riverboat captain. Unfortunately, the river began changing course, putting Bailey's home in jeopardy, and, as a result, Bailey would choose to rebuild the home brick by brick more in town rather than lose it to the river. So, while the original home was likely originally built sometime in the late 1860s or early 1870s, it was reconstructed in town in 1877 to avoid damage from the river. The home was placed on the National Register of Historic Places along with the rest of the Brownville Historic District in, I believe, 1976. The registry paperwork was pretty dense, and none of my resources mention the date it was actually placed on the registry, so this is my best guess. Tangent aside, the Captain Bailey House is currently being used as a museum by the Brownville Historical Society, and it features artifacts from the early years of Brownville, and you can visit the museum yourself to learn more about the town, or even to catch a glimpse of the old captain today. Several sources point the blame for the deaths of Captain Bailey and potentially even his wife to the new neighbors they gained from moving. There are 2 stories surrounding the lore of this house. The first is that the woman next door had the hots for Captain Bailey, so, in order to get her hands on him, She first got her hands on some poison so that she could kill Mrs. Bailey. In the first story, Mr. Bailey is actually the one who ends up eating the poison by accident. The second story I found seems to be more widely accepted, and it is that the jealous neighbor woman was actually able to kill Mrs. Bailey with the poison, but when she came to Mr. Bailey to weasel her way into his life, he wasn't interested, and so she decided to poison him too out of spite. In both stories, the jealous neighbor was never caught. Staff and visitors of the museum seem to think that despite his untimely death in his home, that Bailey has taken up residence even in the afterlife. Whether it is out of love for his home or out of sheer confusion or anger for the way in which he passed is a little unclear, but he seems to make his presence known. Staff have reported that several doors in the museum simply have a mind of their own and open and shut randomly. One door in particular can be a bit more troublesome. As it turns out, when Mr. Bailey's body was discovered, it is said that he was sat down and slumped against a door in the home. It seems that on days when Mr. Bailey is in a real mood, I suppose, that particular door is known to aggressively open and shut. Neighbors of the museum report hearing piano music in the evenings as well, despite no one living in the home anymore. And finally, staff and visitors alike have even reported seeing Mr. Bailey move throughout the home itself. As much as I would like to hope that Captain Bailey's ghost remains in the home for his love of the building, the fits of door slamming lead me to believe that it is likely more that he is confused and upset about his own untimely death. I like to think that being in a place he seemed to love so much in his living life might help to ease that pain, but I can't blame the guy for being upset if there is any credibility to the story I just told. I would be upset too. Now, moving on from the Captain Bailey house, I have two other locations that I thought would have been fun to do. But while they also had hauntings focused on a singular figure, they weren't as fleshed out as the stories surrounding Captain Bailey, so I just want to include them as bonus stories. The first is Centennial Hall. Located in Valentine, Nebraska, Centennial Hall was originally built in 1897 as a high school, but has since been converted into a museum. At the time of this recording, Google has said that it is temporarily closed, so if you are wanting to visit, I would double check on that. Anyway, the ghost story here is based on the untimely death of a student who attended the high school. It is said that in 1944, a student died after someone had poisoned her clarinet reed. Hey Nebraska, what's up with all the poison? This is story 2 out of 3 involving poison, and I just have to ask, are y'all okay? Anyway, after her untimely death, teachers at the school reported seeing her apparition walk in the halls. Even today, people hear music coming from the old music room, despite there no longer being any instruments in the room. I wish the story had more information to it, honestly. Who poisoned this girl's clarinet reed, and why? What kind of high school vendetta did they have against each other? I just wish there were more details, because I know all the stupid stuff I used to get upset about in high school, and I just don't know that anything could have justified me poisoning someone. Alright, the last story I have for you is one that I almost did for the history portion alone, but I decided against it because there was just so little on the paranormal side of the spectrum. Fort Sidney is located in Sidney, Nebraska, and was originally built during the founding of Sidney in 1867, but would later move to its present-day location in 1869. Fort Sidney became pretty important in its early days because it was the first supply stop along the Sidney Black Hills Trail, which was an important trail for gold miners at the time. For what it's worth, I believe that you are able to visit Fort Sidney today if you are at all interested. While there are several buildings on the property, the haunting will be focused in the post commander's home. In 1885, it is said that the wife of a young officer was doing laundry one day when she unfortunately fell down the steps in the home, causing her to break her neck and die. The officer, feeling distraught by what had happened, decided to board up the stairs. In the 1930s, visitors to the home began hearing what sounded like footsteps and someone falling down a set of steps. This was confusing for quite some time because people didn't think that there were any stairs in the home, so even if they felt like they knew what the sound was, it wasn't making logical sense to them due to the architecture of the home that they were aware of. It wouldn't be until 1975 that the stairs were rediscovered and restored. However, access to them is still blocked off. Even today, from time to time, the poor woman's ghost can still be heard replaying her final moments on those steps. Residual hauntings like that always feel so heartbreaking to me. The woman was just going about her day like it was any other, and now she's trapped in a perpetual time loop of her own horrible demise. And also, you're trapped in forever laundry day? It sounds awful. In an effort to end this story on a higher note, I would urge you all to go look into some of the other Nebraska ghost stories and find something that interests you. There were so many more places that I didn't cover, but all of the ones I covered today also featured cool buildings that still stand today and offer an interesting history, so they are worth checking out. Alright, that is all I have for you today. Let me know what you thought of today's ghost stories. Would you want to visit any of these locations? Or have you been to any of these locations yourself? If so, let me know all about it in the comments below. I would love to know if you've seen Captain Bailey. Thanks for sticking around, and if you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to the page. Also, if you have any friends who are interested in crafting and spooky stories, recommend my page to them because it is super helpful. You can also find me on Instagram and Etsy at sitbythefiber, and I will have that linked down below. See ya!